first tool you're going to use are needle nose pliers, and if you can find a pair with a cutting edge built into them, you can save some money that way, as opposed to if you buy pliers and then buy wire cutters separate. And you can find these in most hardware stores, convenience centers, places like that, auto body places, pretty much anywhere you can find these. And these will cost you about $5, and you can get them curved, straight, with the cutters built in. There's a whole bunch of different kinds you can get, but they're real important basically for making loops in your armature's wrist, head, and also the feet of the armature. Some people prefer the curved needle nose pliers as opposed to straight ones because you can sometimes make loops easier that way. Since you're going to use these a lot, I would just get a pair that you're comfortable with. If you happen to have a pair of wire strippers, you can use these as an alternative way to cut your wire instead of buying a pair of wire cutters. But we suggest buying a pair of either wire cutters or using the needle nose pliers with the cutting edges attached. But these will work pretty good if you don't want to spend the extra money. Heavy-duty wire cutters can also be brought to cut your wire, and you'll find that these will cut your wire a lot more cleanly than just using a pair of wire strippers or your needle nose pliers with the cutting edge. And these will cost you about maybe $7 to $10 a pair. The Phillips head screwdriver can be used to twist your wire. How you do that is you fold your wire over and you place the screwdriver inside the fold and just twist it around. But the major reason for using a Phillips head screwdriver for our armature is to make your puppet stand by using it to screw sheet metal screws through the character's feet and into a piece of scrap wood. One tool we recommend is the mini vise for clamping down armature parts, and we'll use this a lot, not just for making aluminum wire armatures, but for making brass armatures especially. And the way this works is by taking the built-in C-clamp and clamping it to your tabletop, and then loosening the top clamp to hold your parts. And since we're going to be twisting wire in there, you don't have to use this. You can use things like C-clamps, welding clamps, things like that. But it's one of my favorite tools, and I highly recommend it, and it only costs about $15. The last tool you're going to use is a power drill, and its only purpose is to speed twist wire. The type of wire you're going to need for your armature is 16th inch gauge aluminum armature wire, and you can buy this in spools of 10, 20, and usually 30 feet. You can usually find aluminum armature wire in craft and hobby shops, or you can get it also at Berman Industries in California, and their website address is www.bermanfoam.com. Blue foam is used to lighten up your puppet, and it comes usually in 8 by 4 foot sheets for about maybe $7, and you can find this stuff in home improvement centers, and it's used usually for insulating the outside of houses. The best thing to cut your blue foam is an Exacto knife, or a very, very sharp knife, and as you can see, it will leave a nice clean edge on all your cuts. You want to use extreme caution also when using an Exacto knife, because just the fact that you know that it can make nice clean cuts in blue foam, it can also cut your hands real easily. epoxy putty is going to be used to make the bones of your armature, or the parts that won't bend. And the stuff comes in a lot of different forms. The kind that we have comes in a tube, and it's used for plumbing purposes. And when you pull it out of the tube, it has a plastic covering, and you have to peel that away before you cut sections of it. And the center area is a hardener, and the outside area is a base. And when you mix the two together, it turns to almost a stone. It's really, really hard stuff, and plumbers use it for adhering pipes together, so it has to be really strong. So we use this for the bones, and it's pretty inexpensive. We brought a whole tube of this for about maybe $5, and that will make somewhere around maybe 6 or 7 armatures. You can find this putty in most home improvement centers, in the plumbing section, and also places that sell car parts. We're going to be using liquid nails to adhere our blue foam to our wire armature, and when you find this stuff, it comes in sometimes large tubes, but you can also find a smaller hobby version like this, and this sells for about maybe $4 a tube. And of course you want to follow all precautions and instructions, and it's fairly basic. You just put this stuff on your blue foam and stick it right onto your armature. JB Weld is a 2-part epoxy, which basically all we're going to use this for is for our alternative joints. And what's so great about it is it's really slow setting, and that allows the putty to sink down into all the little cracks and crevices and whatnot to make really strong bonds. And of course with this you want to read all instructions and precautions as well. It's very simple. You just add equal parts of part A and B, then you just apply it to your parts and wait for it to harden. We're going to be using some sheet metal screws, and the only purpose for them is to screw our puppet's feet down to our set floor or a piece of scrap wood. Before making your armature, it helps to know what a bad armature is. And here is an Elvis Presley sculpture I did about maybe 6 months ago. And as you look at him, he looks like he's fairly sturdy, but I never created him for animation purposes. It was more for sculpting practice. And as you look at him, he's pretty hunched over, and he's got skinny arms, kind of a large head, really skinny legs, and that combination is not generally good for making characters. You don't want to have super skinny legs to support so much clay, because clay is very heavy. And on closer inspection, you can see his hands here where they connect to the wrist. If we were going to actually animate this, it wouldn't work, because there's nothing connecting the hands to the wrist. It's just stuck on there. And that is probably one of the worst signs of a poor armature. And when you're making an armature, you have to have every part connected to the other parts around it, just like a skeleton in a human body. So one of the other signs is that when clay starts to crack, like as you can see here, there's cracking around the wrist, and that's another sign of a poor armature design. And again, like I said, I didn't actually design this armature for the purpose of animating, but a lot of people make this mistake. Now looking at the legs, you can see it's rather wobbly, and why is that? I mean, it's kind of hard to tell when there's so much clay. And the reason for that really is because probably the amount of wire that I used here. And on closer inspection, you can see I've only used 2 strands of wire inside the legs, and you can tell because the leg wire extends down into the feet, which is just a loop, and then a screw goes down and screws the whole body down. And you can't have just two strands. You really need more than that for supporting a body like Elvis. And so that's another sign of a poor armature design, is not knowing how much wire to use in the first place. Now here's a puppet I created about maybe, let's see, must be 5 years ago. And as you can see, he's not hunched over like Elvis. He's still standing really strong, and there's nothing sagging to the floor. So it looks a lot more solid. Now on this armature, every part is connected to the other part. So the wrist and the hands and the shoulders, the spine, the waist, the legs, the ankles, the feet. Every single part on the inside is connected to the other parts, and this armature also incorporates a system where we've used the least amount of wire pieces to make the entire armature. So inside there, he only has about 4 actual strands of wire to create this whole armature. Now the thickness of the clay is another important consideration when making your puppet after you've designed the armature. So when you're drawing your design, you want to make sure that your character doesn't have out of proportion parts such as really huge arms and then tiny skinny legs, or like a really huge head and also really tiny legs, because the weight will sag your entire puppet. Now you can tell if your armature is strong after you design it and added clay by doing a simple stress test. When you press down on an arm like this, you'll see that the aluminum wire has a memory to it, which means it'll bounce back slightly. But when you apply some pressure, it'll hold its shape, and that's a sign that the weight of the clay is not burdening the actual armature you've designed. And here you can see with a surface gauge exactly how much memory this armature has. So we figured out that for the waist and spine and legs and also the feet, 3 strands of 1/16 of an inch gauge aluminum armature wire is best. Now we figured out that for the arms, neck, and head, that 2 strands of 1/16 of an inch gauge aluminum wire will hold those up really well. A good way to start designing your armature, or your puppet rather, is to get some inspirational things like maybe some clay animation videos or books or tapes, magazines, things like that. Anything that you are inspired by and would like to create. And of course, if you can get it on sale or previously viewed, like at Blockbuster Video or something, that's always a good way to go. As you can see, there's always a lot of cool books out there for neat looking characters to use for your designs. So the first thing you want to do is just get a blank piece of paper and start drawing your character. And in this case, what we're doing is drawing a sort of Frankenstein type character, and there's nothing really secret about it. The only thing you want to keep in mind is, not having, like I said before, having like overly huge arms or an overly huge head. Like this is all within pretty much limits of using aluminum wire armatures. Now, once you've designed your character and you're happy with it, you have to divide it down into an actual inch scale, so you can know. You have to transfer these measurements over to your wire and for your cutting it and whatnot. So what you do is you draw a line and you mark off about how high you want it. In this case, we want it to be 9 inches. So you want to measure your 3, 6, and 9 inch marks by using your eye. And then on another blank piece of paper, this is where you want to be accurate for measurement purposes of your wire. So you want to mark off 0 through 9 inches on this piece of paper. So once you've marked off 1 through 9 inches, you just want to sketch a line straight across your paper across each inch mark. Then once you've done that, you want to compare your original drawing next to your accurate drawing, which you're about to do next. And on the sketch drawing, what we did is we figured that 3 lines down from the top is where the top of his head, well, the whole entire head area will fit. So you just sketch it in within the first top 3 inches, and you know that that will be accurate to your other drawing. You can get as detailed as you want, but what you really need to do here is draw your armature inside your drawing using a different colored pen. This will be as accurate as you can get in proportion to your sculpture and your armature at the same time. And that way you can take a pair of calipers and measure your drawing, your accurate drawing, and transfer it over to your sculpture. And also you can take a pair of calipers or just take your wire and place it next to this drawing, and you will know that where a bend on the drawing is, you'll have to bend your wire itself. So it's really pretty simple when you think about it. And you can do this as accurately as you want also. I mean, this is really a basic way of doing things. As you can see now, I've really gone in there and drawn in those lines nice and dark to make it easier to measure. And now further into the tutorial, we skip a step, but you can actually measure each part and write it down on the paper if you like. But it's not really necessary because you're going to be holding your wire up to the sketch to make most of your measurements. If you design your armature, you're going to have to understand where exactly your armature parts will be broken down and how many pieces you'll need. Now the head and neck area will be 2 strands of 1/16 of an inch gauge wire, and it will be all one piece. And the arms and shoulders will also be 2 strands and will be one long piece of wire. Now the spine is 3 pieces, or actually 3 strands of wire, and it's only one piece. The waist, legs, and feet are 3 strands of wire and also one piece. Now the wrist and hands will be 1 piece of wire, but in fact it's actually an extension. These parts, the 2 hands, are an extension of the arms, where you just peel back 1 piece of your wire and cut it off to expose only 1 piece. To twist your wire, it's really simple. All you want to do is take and stretch out 2 pieces of your 1/16 of an inch aluminum armature wire at equal lengths, and place one end in your mini vise, which is connected to your work table, and place the other end in the chuck of your drill, and make sure that one wire isn't longer than the other if possible, and just twist it around. The best way to figure out if you twisted it enough times is to just take a tape measure or a ruler and hold it up next to your wire. You should end up with 3 to 4 twists of wire per inch. Now as you can see, what we did is we just twisted up a nice long piece of wire and placed it on our drawing and bent it exactly where the drawing bends for the let's see, the arms and the shoulders and the wrists and the hands. But you don't want to actually cut your wire the ends to the point where the hands end. You want to actually add extra wire because it's going to be shortened when you twist the loops for the hands. So you want to make sure you have at least 2 inches or 3 inches extra on each side of the arms. Once you've untwisted one strand from the 2 strands up to the point where the wrist and the hands meet, you can see here that I've twisted one wire around the other about 3 times. What this will be is right before the wrist meets the lower arm, it'll prevent the 2 pieces of wire from untwisting further when you're animating, which is really important. So you want to cut off one of the wires, preferably the one where you've twisted it around 3 times, and you should end up with something that looks like this. Now here's a close-up. When you make the hands, all you want to basically do is grab the wire with your needle nose pliers and just make a loop to where you're looping it around, and you have about 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch for your wrist, depending on how large your puppet is. Now the more wire you have for the wrist, the less chance that it'll break. So the longer it is, the longer it should last. And here's a close-up of the wrist. As you can see, we've got lots of extra room for the wrist. We have the loop for the hands, and we have the secondary piece of wire which is twisted right before the wrist. Making the head and neck is a simple thing to do. You just want to twist up about an 8-inch strand long piece of wire, which is just 2 pieces of your 1/16 of an inch gauge wire, twist it together, and then you will separate the ends of just one side, and that's used to twist around the shoulders. So you want to twist it around 3 or 4 times and cut off any extra wire. You don't need to have like a huge spool of wire for this connection. Now wherever possible, you want to snug up the 2 parts together real strong by putting a lot of force on your armature where the 2 parts meet. And we noticed that when we twisted this around, there was a gap, so we just want to take our needle nose pliers and make an extra twist where the 2 parts meet, which will hopefully make a little bit more accurate animation joint right in that area. So the next thing you want to do is lay your wire armature up to this point on top of your drawing, so you know exactly where you want the bend for the head to be. And all you want to do for the head is make just a small loop with a knot in it, or just a knot that's opened up like as a loop like this, almost like a pretzel, and cut off any excess. We're going to be applying foam to this later on, so it doesn't have to be really beautiful or anything. Now the next step is to make the legs, and the legs are really simple. You want to twist up 3 strands of your 1/16 of an inch gauge wire, and you want about 3 or 4 twists per inch, just like the 2 strands, and you want to lay it on your drawing, and you want to have extra wire for the feet, so the length is a little bit longer, and you want to trim it down enough to where when you twist that extra length of wire into a loop, and the loop has to have two twists, or 2 loops I guess you could say, where it overlaps slightly. You want that to end up right where your ankles are, so that's how you figure out how much extra to use. And once you've made a loop, you want to bend at a 90-degree angle the entire loop towards you to make a foot. Now the spine is made by using 3 strands of your 1/16 inch gauge wire, and when you lay it down on your drawing, you want to make sure that you leave enough extra to where it overlaps on each side of your waist and your shoulders at about maybe 1 inch to 1.5 inches. Then you want to separate the 3 strands into a Y shape. Now the way you do that is you want to look at it from the top down, or straight on rather, and you want to see almost an equilateral triangle, or something that resembles sort of an eagle's claw. When you connect the spine to the shoulders, how that's done is you want to take the 2 strands that are towards you and bend them away, and the single strand which is on the back part, you want to bend towards you. So in other words, the front and back are going to be going in opposite directions when you twist them around the shoulders, and it's almost like your fingers, and it creates a really strong bond. So you want to do the same thing to the hip area by taking the 2 strands and making them go away from you and the single strand towards you, and you want to snug things up with your needle nose pliers really tight, because the hips and the shoulders are going to be under a lot of stress and supporting a lot more clay than the arms, so just make sure everything's real nice and tight. Now all that's left is to screw your armature down to a piece of scrap wood by taking your Phillips head screwdriver and a pair of your sheet metal screws, and this will support your armature through the next steps, which is adding your epoxy putty and also your blue foam. And now you're pretty much ready to apply your epoxy, and you're going to need your epoxy putty. You're going to need a sharp knife, and you're also going to need a small cup of water. So you simply just you pull out your epoxy, and you want to take the plastic covering off, because that will you don't want to mix that in with your putty itself. And then take your knife and then just cut about maybe 1/4 inch or so off the end. Now once you've cut your epoxy putty off of the main piece, you just want to dip it in some water to keep it from sticking to your fingers, and mix it thoroughly until it creates an even color with no marbling effects. And to apply it, as you can see, all you want to do is take and push it into where you've connected the parts. So you've got a connection point where the waist and the spine connect, and also where the shoulders and the spine connect. And those are the 2 first parts that you want to completely cover and wait until the epoxy hardens. And so once it hardens, you know that you've got a solid foundation for working on the rest of the parts without disturbing the most important parts, which are where the spine connects to the rest of the body. Now if you have extra epoxy that you don't know what to do with, instead of wasting it, you might want to just work quickly and apply it to your armature. And we have 2 small pieces, and what we're going to do is just put it on our hands and make our hands. And all you want to do with that is make sort of a flat pancake and cover your twisted wire. And you want to make sure that you don't cover the wrist area, because you don't want that to be stiff. That's going to be the part that bends, and any part that is epoxy pretty much won't bend at all. It's going to be completely solid. So once you've applied your epoxy and you know that you're just going to wait for it to harden, you can just dip your fingers in some water and go over the whole thing and smooth it out. One way to tell if your epoxy putty is hardened is to just take your fingernail and try to indent it. And now if you can't indent it, you know that it's probably hard enough to start working on the rest of your armature. So the next step is to apply your epoxy putty, some more that you've mixed up, to the legs. And when you're doing this, you want to keep in mind that any place that you apply epoxy will not bend at all. So you want to keep exposed areas, such as where the hips are, and the knees and the ankles, so they can bend freely for animation. There's not really any kind of secret to this step, except that the larger the gap between where your two parts of epoxy are, for example, let's say the top and the bottom part of your legs, the larger the gap in between there where there's exposed wire, the more that piece of wire will last for animation. But the bad part about that is, with a larger gap, that also means that the wire will be somewhat looser and will not be able to support as much weight. So you just keep applying it, and once you've gotten to this stage, you want to pretty much get ready to start smoothing things out, because I mean, what's going to happen is this epoxy sets up in about maybe 10 minutes, and since it's so fast, you really got to work quick and smooth things out, and make sure you like things before you commit. Now at the arms, it's a little bit different. The gap can be a little bit wider in between parts, and the main reason is because when you're gesturing your puppets, most of the gesturing comes from the arms, and there's going to be a lot more movement in the upper body parts. The only tools you're going to need for applying the blue foam is your Exacto Knife and your tube of liquid nails. For applying a piece to the chest area, we're just going to hold our blue foam up to our armature and score some lines. So when you're trying to figure out the size of the piece of your blue foam, you want to make the widest area at the top, somewhere where the armpits are, about that wide, and the narrowest area will be about where the widest part of the hips are. So as you can see, all you need to do is to score your blue foam with a knife. You don't actually have to cut all the way through and just snap the pieces off. The next step is to cut your piece of blue foam in half, And you do that by cutting around the circumference of your blue foam evenly in the center of the foam. And you do this, and you keep scoring and digging deeper in with your knife until finally the two pieces become loose enough to where you can separate them. So now you should have two pieces that separate easily, and they'll be exactly the same size, and you'll have two sides that are rough, and of course the other sides will be perfectly flat. So you want to take the flat side and you want to cut a groove down the center, and we do that by cutting a V shape straight in the center area, holding our knife at an angle to remove enough of the blue foam to where you can actually put a piece of wire on the inside of this groove. So we're just going to take a simple sculpting tool and just pop out our blue foam, and it should come out pretty easily. And if it doesn't come out easily for you, just take your knife and score it a few more times until it does. You want to repeat the exact same process for the other side, and you want to make sure that when you cut it, it's exactly down the center of your piece of blue foam. Well, I guess it doesn't really have to be that accurate, but the more accurate the better usually. The less trimming you'll have to do after you apply it to your armature. When you put both pieces side by side, you should be able to see straight through. So you can see when we put the blue foam up to our armature, it's a little bit long. So we're going to trim up our blue foam by taking our Exacto knife and just cutting off the bottom part. And it comes right off. And you should have a really nice fit when you hold your blue foam up to your armature. And of course, with the other piece, you want to do the same thing. You want to make sure that both pieces are as close to the same size as you can get. You want to dry fit things by applying your blue foam without gluing it, just to check the fit. And as you can see, it fits pretty good. So the next step is to take some liquid nails and apply it to one side of your blue foam. The next thing you want to do is just take both pieces and push them together and smush your liquid nails around so that both pieces have an even coverage of your glue. Now there is one step I forgot to do here, and I should have put some glue on the wire first. So you want to make sure you do that, and then just press your two pieces together to make sort of a sandwich. And once things dry, this will be pretty solid. Now, our Frankenstein design, Frankenstein has a pretty large head, so what we're going to do is lighten the head somewhat by taking a piece of blue foam and just sticking it on the head to put our clay around it. And so to do that, we just drew a circle, or an oval rather, and we're just going to cut that out. The next step is to just remove all the sharp angles on our blue foam, because when we're sculpting, we want to make sure that we don't have any sharp angles that we'll have to cut away after we've started sculpting, because it makes it really hard to sculpt. And all we're really doing is holding our foam at an angle of about 45 degrees and just slicing off the edges. So you should end up with something like this. And all that's left now is to apply this to the head of our armature. And the way we do that is we're going to cut a groove down the center area where the head would meet the neck. And the width of the groove itself has to be the same width as the wire that you see on our armature. That way when we're twisting our head back and forth from left to right, the foam won't have any give to it. It'll be nice and tight, and also that it'll be more secure, and chances are it won't fall off by accident or by too much force. Once you've cut your groove, you just want to dry fit your piece on your armature and make sure that it fits. And if it's not a deep enough groove, you want to cut it a little bit deeper. And if it's too deep, you might want to just glue a piece of foam in the top. And just check it out, make sure it looks good. And all that's really left now is to glue this last piece on by taking some liquid nails and applying it to the wire. So all you have to do now is just take your blue foam and push it onto the wire and wait about 2 hours for this to dry. Usually it doesn't take that long, but you want to make sure that it's good and cured before you apply your clay. And there it is, one completed armature. This is ready for application of clay and can also be animated at this point. The things we're going to need for our alternative joints are some JB Weld epoxy and a dowel rod, some craft wire, and an armature, which doesn't have anything added to it. And the first thing you do is to mark off some sections on your dowel rod with a pen, exactly where you're going to have the hardened areas. So this is basically taking place of the epoxy putty that you saw in the first parts of the tutorial. Once you've marked it off, you can take a pair of wire cutters and snip off pieces of your dowel rod. The next step is to take some of your craft wire, which is some steel wire, and this particular wire is used mostly in floral shops, and you can usually find it in craft and hobby stores. It's very cheap. And what this is going to be used for is to make a splint. So if you ever broke an arm and had a splint made, all you're going to do is take your craft wire and twist it around both the dowel rod and the armature. So all you want to do is snug it up with a pair of your pliers and make sure everything is tight and that there's no pieces of wire sticking out. And now what we're going to use is some JB weld, because epoxy's got the strongest bond out of all the glues you can get. But if you want to use a non-toxic white glue, you can use that, something like Elmer's. Crazy glue also works to an extent. You can also just wrap double the amount of craft wire around the splint to make it really super strong. But all you want to do if you're going to use epoxy in this particular case is take about a drop or so and just put it on a piece of paper of both part A and B. And if you have your dowel rod and you have some extra pieces that you didn't use, you just use that to mix the two parts together. Once you've mixed both parts together, you can just strip it along the edge where both parts of the wooden dowel rod and the armature meet. And since it's a slow setting epoxy, you want to make sure that the epoxy is upright so it can drip down with gravity into the cracks and whatnot, and it'll make a really super tight, strong bond between both the wood and the aluminum wire. So you can use this system of making alternative joints this way by replacing all your epoxy putty parts with craft wire and dowels.
Hey everybody, this is Mark, and it's about 10 years since I made this video, and so you have to forgive the low quality of the video itself, but the information is actually still the same. It's still relevant today, but one of the things that I forgot to do was to add information on how you make tie downs. So tie downs are essentially what you see here in this picture. What you see is wire which is wrapped around a nut, and there's plumber's epoxy putty that you put around the wire and attach the nut from above the wire, so it pulls down on it when you put the bolt underneath the set floor and tighten down the nut and washer. So essentially you can use a wing nut instead of that nut and washer, which is a lot simpler, and the bolt that goes up inside just has to make sure that the threads are the proper thread size for the bolt in the foot. And then and what you can see next is essentially you put the bolt up underneath the set floor. You drill a hole into your set floor, it can be wood or metal, and you stick it up just enough, and underneath you can see how you can tighten that little nut and push it up against the bottom of the set floor. And from above you put the foot down on top of the bolt and put the bolt up inside that nut in the foot. So when you sandwich the two together and you tighten down the nut underneath the set floor, it compresses the foot and tightens it down, and that holds that foot really secure so that your puppet can walk or stand up without falling over. Of course, the other way, like we showed earlier, you can just take a screw, make sure that your set floor is made out of wood, and just screw that foot straight down to the set. And also, you can see here in a more professional armature, one of our recent armor benders kits that Tetsuo from Japan, he creates these and machines them, and you can see how it looks in a more advanced armature. Essentially, it's a brass foot that has threads, and you can see that there's two little, there's a wing nut and another thumb nut, and that gets screwed up into the bottom of the set floor and holds that foot in place. So it's just a more advanced, professional design, but you can simply just use a regular old pair of nuts and a bolt, and pretty much that's all you need. So anyway, the last thing that I want to mention is that we also have, at the end of this video, we have a video that Webster Colcord made called Mad Doctors of Borneo, which was also included on the CD. And you can still buy the CDs as I'm saying this, but we might discontinue it in favor of just downloading it like you're watching now. And this was also made right before I met Webster, and Webster was the one who taught me most of the tricks of how to make wire armatures. So enjoy it, and thanks for watching.
Ow!